episode of American DA Live. On today's show, host Jack Patty, Ray the DA, Jeff Bischoff, and Don Turpin will talk about the overall parole board hearing experience, as well as the Sally Diamond case. Sally was stalked and harassed by one of her co-workers and was eventually shot in the head by him. After she had passed, he abused her body and then dumped her in a wooded area. Stay tuned for more details on this case.
It's 7 minutes after the hour of 9 o'clock, 25th day of March. Commonwealth Attorney Ray Larson with us this morning. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Jack.
This is not a subject that we have never broached on this program before, but this is a little different way of doing it this morning. Introduce us to our guest, sir.
Well, Kentucky in the early 80s passed a law that created a sentence of life without parole for 25 years, meaning that a person got a life sentence and they could not be considered for parole until they'd served 25 years. And there were a number of people that were convicted under that law and sentenced to life and could not be considered for parole until they'd served 25 years. And those are all now coming to a head. We had the parole hearing in the last several weeks of the killers of Mike Turpin, and because they got sentences of life without parole for 25 years. We now have another case in which that has come to our attention, and that was the murder of Sally Diamond in Louisville. And her brother, Jeff Bischoff, has gone through the same parole trauma that Don Turpin has gone through. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about the process, because it's so, there's so much indignity that goes along with it, that you see survivors of homicide victims having to go to a parole board and basically beg this panel to do what the jury or the judge said. And that's a life sentence, and not able to be paroled for 25 years.
Which in essence gives a life sentence to our guests this morning too. It never goes away, does it?
It never goes away, and they're going to be able to tell it better. But with us today is Jeff Bischoff and Don Turpin, and we want to talk a little bit about just the process and their reaction to it and that sort of business. But before we do that, I'd like Jeff is Vice President for Gray Construction. He grew up in Louisville, went to the University of Kentucky. He lives now in Danville. And Jeff, welcome.
Ray, thank you for having me.
Now tell me, I got a call from you some time ago, weeks ago, and talk to me a little bit about that phone call and why did you make it and that sort of thing.
Ray, I've been blessed certainly to have a lot of support and a lot of good friends throughout this process, and one of the gentlemen that's been a key supporter of mine and a very strong ally is a man by the name of Doug Elam. And Doug and I have been friends for a number of years, and unfortunately Doug and his family tragically had their son Derek taken away from them by murder 7 years ago. And coincidentally, the man that killed Derek was out on parole when that crime occurred. And
now hold on, let me elaborate on that a little bit. That guy's name was Taquan Neblett, and when he was, I think, 17 years old, he got in a taxi cab in Louisville and robbed the taxi driver and shot him in the back of the head and killed him. He then was paroled after serving maybe 7 years, I'm not sure. And then he was paroled, and the parole board sent him to Lexington to live. Thanks.
What was the point of that?
Oh, they wanted to get him out of Louisville. And so within very few months, he goes into Sammy's music store where Derek Elam worked. He went in and robbed that place, and he was taking Derek Elam and Sammy back into another room and shot Derek in the back of the head. So there's another parole board success story. Okay, so Doug Elam,
Right.
talk to you, Jeff.
Right. Doug and I were having a conversation, and certainly, Ray, I've been a big fan, big supporter of yours, and the work that you do here in Fayette County. And Doug just said, listen, he said, I think it'd be a good idea if you were to contact Ray. And of course, I had watched Don and his family go through the same process that my family and I were getting ready to embark on. So, you know, I made that call to you, Ray, and was basically looking for just some counsel, some direction, just try to somehow prepare myself and my family on what to expect through the parole process.
Because you got a parole hearing coming up.
We did.
Okay, now let's stop here for a minute, and let's take us back and tell us about the crime that resulted in this parole hearing coming up.
Right. My sister Sally, her full name was Saber Ann Diamond. She was known to me, my family, and all of her friends as Sally. Sally was, at the time of her death, a 22-year-old college student in Louisville. She was working her way through college, had gotten a job at Sears, working in the Jefferson Mall there in Louisville. And she'd worked there for about 2 years. And at the time she started working at Sears, she attracted the attention of a co-worker by the name of John Harris. And Sally was a beautiful, compassionate, caring individual, would never do anything to hurt another. And John Harris constantly asked her out on dates, constantly, basically just unwanted advances. Sally,
Is he older?
no, actually,
About the same age?
about the same age, Jack.
Well, that's not, at a certain point, this becomes not only harassment, but it became stalking. And stalking is a frightening crime to people who are the subject of being stalked. And so I have no doubt that she was worried and panic-stricken by the fact that this yard bird wouldn't leave her alone.
Ray, it got so bad. That started almost immediately after she started there. And so we fast forward about 2 years to the spring of 1986. And the stalking, as Ray just described, had just gone to a whole new level. It got so bad that we went to the police on a number of occasions. And unfortunately, we had no recourse. There was nothing that could be proven. There was nothing that could be substantiated. And to Ray's point, obviously the stalking laws in 1986 aren't what they are today.
And they're still not great. I mean, okay.
Was there an order, a court order, to keep this guy away from her?
There was not,
No.
Jack. There was
You
not.
can't, see, you gotta have a relationship or a child in common, you see.
I see.
Even dating partners can't get those things, and that was one of the proposals in the legislature that the legislature just promptly ignored. But that's where we are.
Yeah.
Ray, it got so bad to the point that my sister would have to park her car at other people's houses or a neighbor's driveway so he wouldn't know she was home. April 3rd, she turned 22 in 1986. On April 6th was Easter Sunday. My family and I, after attending Mass, we were in the front yard of the house. Mom wanted to take pictures. And I can remember we were there taking pictures, and she said, my sister Sally said, there he is. And there he was, driving up in front, back and forth in front of the house. And so we fast forward. I was a junior in high school at the time, on spring break. My father and I were at our farm in Nelson County in Bardstown. And we got a phone call, wanting to know if we'd seen Sally. And obviously, the night before, April 7th, she got off work at Sears. Her and some friends went to the movies after work. They got in a car. She left her car in the parking lot at Sears. They drove to the cinemas there in Louisville, watched a movie. During this whole time, John Anthony Harrison, an accomplice, followed her, waited for her to get off work, followed her to the movie theater, waited in the parking lot outside the movie theater, Once the movie was over, they drove back to the Jefferson Mall, where they split up in their cars. My sister in her car proceeded to drive home to my parents' house in Louisville. John Harris, Timothy Elmore, his accomplice, followed my sister, and about a half mile from my mother and father's house, pulled around her, blocked the road leading to my parents' house. John Harris got out of his car, had a .22 caliber pistol with hollowed out bullets. He had drilled the bullets himself. Got out of the car, walked to my sister's car, had a brief argument, discussion, whatever. Long story short, he stuck the pistol in the window, shot her, and shot her in the head.
People in the Attorney General's office are constantly having to fight to protect a conviction. And it just goes on and on and on. And Don went to the parole board, and the parole board did what they did. But no sooner than he had been there, and it's been a week later, and tell me what you get in the mail.
Well, just last week I received a letter from the Attorney General's office, and it started out, as you know, which I did not know, or I had forgotten, but the attorney reminded me. Karen Brown had filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus in the U.S. District Court, challenging the validity of her convictions, and the attorney said in simple terms, she's asking to be set free and granted a new trial. This is 25 years after the fact, and this is not the first one of these we received. We've been through the Circuit Court, the Appeals Court, and the Supreme Courts 3 different times.
Supreme Court of the United States.
And it's 3 different times, and it's 2 people, so that's 6 times that you have to go through it. And fortunately, we've been to every one of them except the U.S. Supreme Court. We didn't make that one. But you sit there, and you're at their mercy. You don't even get to speak with these hearings. And it's just a constant challenge to try to keep them behind bars.
And you know everything that he's saying, don't you?
You know, Jack, the thing about it is, and you know, again, I was 18 at the time of my sister's death, and you know, now I'm an old wise 43, I guess. But you know, the thing of victims' rights that I've learned over the last few years, I mean, that is a fallacy, that is a myth, and that is just simply something that just doesn't exist. You know, I thought when we went through the process, you know, that it was everybody, all branches of the government, you know, walking in hand in hand, you know, to make sure that their citizens, that their constituents were well represented, were protected, and that the interest of the people are served. But that's not the case. It is so far from the case that it's ridiculous. You know, we spend all of our time during the parole process talking about convicted murderers' rights, their options.
To learn more on this case, click below or tune in every Friday morning at 9 a.m. on WVLK News Talk 59.